Hey there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And today we're here with a couple topics. I don't even know what Adam's doing. I'm doing something. What are you doing?
Yeah, we have two topics. I'm going to be doing a legend from the Americas, known as the Piasa, or Pious Saw. That's how you say it, Pious Saw. Robin, what are you going to be covering?
I'm going to also be covering something in America called the Bennington Triangle. So we're going to stay here in the States this episode. Welcome.
Pretty nice. Pretty good stuff. How's your week been? How have you been since the last time we spoke? I've only seen you every moment I possibly could because I'm out here with you, which is always nice. And I should know these things, and I kind of do. But I just want you to share it with me so you can share it with them.
Tired, work, we did some con stuff this past weekend in Fresno.
First time in Fresno.
But yeah, it's just same old, nothing new.
Nothing new, pretty busy, but good stuff. So just tired, not enough hours in the day. I remember being young and thinking like, yeah, people say that, but they're full of shit. No, it's a real thing.
Daylight savings time is pretty crazy too, now that the sun is,
out later.
It's out later, coming up. It's like when I leave the house for work, the sun's up, and it's weird,
Really?
Yeah.
I thought that happens when you roll it back. Because, if the sun rose at 7 and the time moved forward to 8, you're right. Yeah, that's how it works. It's so hard to keep track of this shit. God, I'm so glad they might get rid of daylight savings time. Everyone, fingers crossed. But yeah, you never ask, but I'm good, I guess. So.
I mean, I know you work.
I work. Yeah, I work from home. I work hard. I also worked on the road. I worked all weekend, so this marks the third or fourth week in a row that I've had to put in overtime, which was not mandatory unless I wanted to work a fuck ton on Monday and Tuesday because it's just been kind of crazy. But that does happen sometimes, so it is what it is. But we're here with you, this wonderful show, to bring you these two fascinating topics, and I believe I'm going to be going first.
Yeah.
Cool. So this week I wanted to cover another legend. I've had fun diving back into those lately. And we've had this one on our list for a minute. It's been on there for a while. But there isn't a ton of information on it. And sometimes you're just not able to find the things you want. And while I was digging through, I found a few extra things regarding this. And as I was looking into it, I was like, you know what? Why not? I feel like I've dug up enough of this to tell the story properly. And it is frustrating sometimes. You have stuff on the list that you've had requested that you want to cover, but there really isn't a lot, there's not a lot to go on. It won't fill an episode. So you kind of hang on to those topics for an episode where you're going to combine a bunch of small things into one.
Yeah.
I figured this was going to be relegated to one of those. But after I found more information on it, I thought I'd just do a full topic on it. And I'm glad I did. I really enjoyed learning this. And my script is one of my favorite scripts I've written in a long time. So without further ado, dear listener, I present to you the Piasa. And I had trouble with the pronunciation of this. I did look it up in a bunch of different places because when I see the word Piasa, I think Piasa. That's what I immediately want to say. I don't know why, but apparently it's pronounced Pious Saw, and I'm going to try and say it that way going forward. So something that's important to understand about the Pious Saw is that there is a legend about this creature/cryptid. And that legend is really specific. It's got this really, really in-depth story. It's not like a lot of legends where you hear things back and forth depending on who's telling it. There seems to be one solid telling of this, which is rare. And it runs at odds with some of the stuff that I've seen about the Pious Saw on the internet. In certain places, they refer to it as an underwater panther creature. The underwater panther is a different cryptid, but the original legend with the Pious Saw, it is not that. It's not the underwater panther, so I want to separate those two things to start, because when I tell you this legend, it's definitely not about an underwater panther. And the legend has been around for some time. The area it originates from is actually southwest Illinois, in what is now Alton, Illinois.
Interesting.
So it's actually really close to where I grew up, really close, being 4 or 5 hours away, I would guess, maybe closer to 4. Because I was northwest Indiana, this is southwest, so it's the whole length of Illinois and then south quite a bit. But either way, it's someplace that I totally could have visited had I known this growing up. So explorers, also known as colonizers or invaders, depending on your perspective, in this area in the 1600s came upon something that startled them. It was a massive rock painting of a giant beast. So it's like a rock wall that had this huge thing painted on it, and it was startling. This account that I'm about to tell you is real, and it actually dates back to 1673. A French priest named Jacques Marquette was in the area, and I'm not sure if this Marquette has anything to do with like the Marquette place. I think there's a town or a city named Marquette, and I think there's a university named Marquette in Illinois as well.
I like to go to the market.
I hate you so much.
That's where I pick up all my groceries.
So this French priest named Jacques was in the area, and he saw this massive painting on the limestone bluff that overlooked the Mississippi River, and he described the event as such, quote, "While skirting some rocks which by their height and length inspired awe, we saw upon one of them 2 painted monsters, which at first made us afraid, and upon which the boldest savages dare not long rest their eyes. They are as large as a calf." These are referring to the painting themselves. "They are as large as a calf. They have horns on their heads like those of a deer, a horrible look, red eyes, a beard like a tiger's, a face somewhat like a man's, a body covered with scales, and so long a tail that it winds itself around the body, passing above the head and going back between the legs, ending in a fish's tail. Green, red, and black are the 3 colors composing the picture. Moreover, these 2 monsters are so well painted that we cannot believe that any savage is their author, for good painters in France would find it difficult to reach that place conveniently to paint them. Here is approximately the shape of the monsters as we have faithfully copied it." And then he actually did a drawing of it. So Jacques, when he's referring to the Native Americans in this, is saying the word savages because these quote-unquote explorers to the area at the time were by and large pieces of shit, and they referred to Native Americans as such. And it's evidence that he's a piece of shit by the fact that he refuses to believe the painting was done by the exact people who had put it there.
Right.
And it inspires such awe in him and fear, and he can't even recognize it because that's how his brain is set up. Here's the thing, though. By the time Jacques came across this image, it was already deteriorating. It had been there for a long time. And apparently the local Native American tribe, known as the Illiniwek, I'm pretty sure I'm saying that one right, had a tradition when they passed by this painting, they would throw rocks or discharge whatever ranged weapons they had at it.
What?
Yeah, side note, yes, Illinois is named after this tribe, just in case you were wondering.
Whoa! Oh, that's cool. Today I learned.
Yeah, so the creature, as it was seen at the time Jacques passed it, did not have wings, but it said this was due to time passing, it deteriorating, and most importantly, all this shit being thrown at it, because they threw it directly at the wings. Aside from that, it is supposed to have wings based on the legend. This is where some of the stuff gets mixed up, thinking that it's an underwater panther, because in this description, it did not have wings. So the legend that accompanies the creature comes from a long time before 1670s when this was seen by Jacques, and the legend itself goes a little something like this. The Illiniwek long ago had to deal with the Piasa. In this time, which I don't know the time frame of, so we'll call it the long ago, the tribe was led by Chief Owataga. Again, if I say this incorrectly, I do apologize. I mean all sorts of respect, because the chief was pretty awesome. The tribe had it pretty good. They lived off the land, they hunted, they fished. Life was good. And then the Pious Saw came. One day, a young man named Udom, which was Owataga's son, and his friend were fishing when they heard something scream. They looked up and saw a giant fucking bird-like creature flapping its wings and taking to the sky on the other side of the river. Now, I want to say, when they say river, I assume they mean the Mississippi River, because that's the river that's right there. For those of you that haven't seen the Mississippi, it's wide as fuck.
The Mississippi?
That's what we call it, dog.
Okay.
Near this area, specifically in this area, I looked it up, it is a mile wide.
Wow.
A mile is very long. I think the largest portion of the river, when it's not a standing body of water, it's 2 miles wide. Huh. When it's a standing body of water, it runs into a lake. I think it's in Minnesota. It's like 11 miles wide because it's considered the entire lake.
Okay, gotcha.
But I mean, a mile's a long way. So if you're on one bank and you see something happening a mile away, it's a far ways and it's going to be kind of hard to see. You know? But they can see this giant bird just taking to the sky. And when I say big, you may think, how big, Adam? Well, listener, it's big enough where it was easily rising into the air with these massive wings while clutching in its talons a fucking person. And it's just carrying it into the sky. So Udom and his friend watch it rise into the sky with ease and just disappear out of sight. And they nope the fuck out. And they go back to their village. Everyone back at their village was already freaked out because they had seen the thing flying. And the villagers just hid out, and they hoped that the young man that was taken would escape the bird and come back. But he never returned. And every morning after that, the Pious Saw would appear in the sky and carry off another member of the tribe. And no one that was carried off ever came back.
Oh, so it just kidnapped people.
Took them. They don't know what happened to them. The name Pious Saw was given to the creature after this, which literally means, quote, the bird which devours men. Side note, not just men, women, and children, in fact. It stated men in the royal sense of the human sense. So Chief Awatoga decided that they needed to do something. But he also knew that they were outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, and outplanned.
God damn it.
So he went to his lodge and he decided to fast and pray for guidance. And the next day he came out of his lodge and the chief was like, we got to make an all-out stand.
Oh, my lord.
I'm going to need 6 right-hand men. So he picked the 6 bravest warriors and he headed to the top of the highest bluff in the area. The 6 warriors took bows and each had a quiver of poisoned arrows. That's all they were told to bring. And they got to the top and they hid themselves per the chief's instructions. And Chief Awatoga stood on the edge of the bluff waiting for this big evil bird to show up. And when it did, Chief Awatoga peeled off his shirt, looked the Pious Saw directly in the eye and said, so what do you want to do? And the Pious Saw charged him and reached down with its massive claws to carry him away. Is it claws or talons? I feel like they're interchangeable, but there might be some specific thing you have to say.
I like that you just kind of glaze over the, what do you want to do?
What do you want to do?
The stupid South Park reference, if you guys didn't know.
It's a wonderful South Park reference. So it reaches down and it grabs him, but the chief was ready. He dropped to the ground and he clung to the rock and the vines around him. And the Pious Saw grabbed at him and tried to carry him away, but the chief just clung to the ground. And the Pious Saw kept grabbing at him and it sunk its talons in deeper, tearing into Awatoga's shoulder. And he grabbed the root of a tree that was at the edge of the bluff and he just basically refused to be carried off.
Oh, wow.
The Pious Saw was frustrated that his prey wouldn't come along easily and bellowed a mighty roar from the bluff that sounded like rare.
Could it have been just a big predatory bird?
Maybe. And you're gonna find some of the stuff I'm gonna tell you pretty interesting later on.
Okay.
So this bird flaps harder and harder trying to get into the air, and the harder it flapped, the more it exposed its weak points. And which glow, reddish yellow like in Zelda, as we all know. When you fight a boss, you can see its weak points.
Okay.
When those weak points revealed themselves, the 6 warriors popped out and began firing their poison arrows at the creature. And the more they hit the Pious Saw, the more it tried to rip Chief Awatoga from his spot, but the chief refused to be taken.
Okay.
The Pious Saw finally realized the chief was not the prey and released him, flying backwards and smashing into the peak of the bluff. And it was hurt and disappointed by the turn of events, letting out this horrific sound to protest what had occurred, and its shout echoed off the cave walls.
Wow.
It went, "Aw."
Oh.
It wound downwards until it finally collided with the water that was the Mississippi River and vanished beneath the waves. And the Pious Saw was defeated. It was never seen again.
They didn't find the body?
Nope. The 6 they're not going to go looking for it back in the day. That's it's in this deep river. The river's not that deep, but it's wide as fuck, and the flow is intense, so I doubt they went and tried to retrieve it.
Okay.
The 6 brave warriors rushed over to their chief, who was in really bad shape. And they said, "Chief, are you okay?" And they tended to his wounds, and they started to carry him. When the chief looked at them as a group and said, quote, "Fuck that bird."
Wow.
End quote. And the
Your
warriors,
stories are so dumb.
the warriors cheered, and the chief actually got taken back to the village and wound up recovering from his injuries. In fact, he recovered well enough where he went out and he celebrated with his tribe, and they partied night and day to celebrate their great victory. And
is that true?
That's true. They ate everything, but my dialogue is 100% accurate.
Okay.
They ate, drank, and danced for days to celebrate. And I'm pretty sure my dialogue with "fuck that bird" is accurate. And I'm going to tell you why. So when the ceremony was winding to a close, they went to a stone wall near where the battle had taken place, and they painted a massive mural of the creature to commemorate their victory and to honor those that had been lost. This is the painting that Jacques actually saw. The original painting is said to have been the largest Native American painting ever discovered.
That's crazy.
The tradition the tribe held was to hurl objects and projectiles at the bird, in particular at its weak spots, whenever they passed by the same way that those 6 brave warriors did during the battle, which is where that came from. An explorer who went to the area named A.D. Jones in 1838, so like 150 years later, investigated the painting and noted, quote, "The 10,000 bullet marks upon the cliff seem to corroborate the tradition related to me in the neighborhood," end quote. When these tribe folk wound up obtaining guns, basically, the tradition stayed the same. They were just shooting fucking bullets at it instead of arrows or hurling rocks.
That's so sad.
I mean, I don't really think it's sad. I think it's awesome that this tradition carried on for like 200, maybe more years. I mean, hundreds of years. They've been having this painting on the wall and just shooting stuff at it. And he also noted that 2 tribes of Native Americans had recently passed by the mural on their way to a council meeting in the 1830s, and they all fired their rifles at the bird. So the mural and the tradition were real. So was the battle. Was the bird. It's not unthinkable, like Robin mentioned, that some massive bird could have existed. And so many Native Americans of especially the North American continent have legends about massive birds. See episode 72 when I cover the Thunderbird.
Okay.
One particular man named Professor John Russell believes he discovered something that further corroborates this legend. Listen to this shit. In 1836, Professor Johnny Russ decides he wants to investigate the legend himself. He knows of the mural, he knows the tradition of it being shot to shit, and decides he wants to see if these local tribes that have this tradition are in the right location. They said that they painted the mural nearby the battle, and he wants to see what he can find in that region.
Okay.
So he heads out on an excursion with a guide to see what they can find. He winds up finding a cave 150 feet up the bluff, and that bluff is supposed to be the one where the battle took place. When he set foot in this cave, he noted the following, quote, "After a long and perilous climb, we reached the cave. The roof of the cavern was vaulted, and the top was hardly less than 20 feet high. The shape of the cavern was irregular, but so far as I could judge, the bottom would average 20 by 30 feet. So this is a big fucking cave.
Yeah.
The floor of the cavern throughout its whole extent was one mass of human bones.
What?
Skulls and other bones were mingled in the utmost confusion.
No way.
To what depth they extended, I was unable to decide, but we dug to a depth of 3 or 4 feet in every part of the cavern, and still we found only bones. The remains of thousands must have been deposited here. How and by whom and for what purpose, it is impossible to conjecture," end quote.
So that's just like where it nested, and it like brought all its victims.
Yeah, and there's thousands of these people that got brought back. So this thing must have been doing this for a long, long time. To this day, folks who know of the legend believe that this is the lair of the Pious Saw. The story was published in 1848 in a magazine about the legend and the supposed confirmation of the lair, and it was also published in 1887 in a book called Records of Ancient Races in the Mississippi Valley.
That's interesting. I didn't know there were any.
Yeah.
So,
I would love to know about the cave location and if it's been rediscovered. I couldn't find any information about whether or not the location is known. The painting was weathered by time and honestly by being shot to shit. The tradition held up. Apparently, as it faded, a local company who was all about mining out limestone and all this other shit around the area, and they didn't care about preserving history, they literally took down where this thing was painted when they just decided to harvest it for who knows what.
Wow.
It has since been relocated several hundred feet away from the original spot on another limestone wall as it was originally. It is refreshed often, as limestone is not the best canvas for a mural, but it can be found in Alton, Illinois if you are visiting. I will post pictures of it on our Facebook and Instagram. I honestly think after all the topics and legends that we have covered, this one to me feels like one of the most, if not the most likely to be based on a true story. I love this legend. I love everything about it. The creature, the defiance of the people, the bravery, and the tradition of painting an image of the bird and carrying on the chief's famous words of, "Fuck that bird." It's amazing.
People still honor the tradition of painting the bird, flipping the bird,
I wonder if that's where it came from.
They draw,
They flipped that bird.
Yeah,
Yep, they sure did. Yeah. And maybe on the way down, the chief was like, "Fuck you."
All right, we're so tired. Our jokes are just not funny.
No, I think we just discovered where that came from. So either way, I think it's amazing, and that, my spooky friends, is the legend of the Pious Saw. and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks. Nice information.
You're welcome.
Lots of historical tidbitties.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, so before we move on into Robin's topic, we're going to take a quick commercial break.
All right. Welcome to my half of the episode. The not so, I don't know. I guess yours isn't necessarily cheerful, but mine is definitely not uplifting.
I feel like mine is kind of cheerful. It was fun for sure.
I feel like mine's going to be interesting. We'll get into it. So this week I had originally planned to do a true crime topic, but as with many weeks, the topics kind of take an unexpected turn. So it went from true crime to disappearances to this really interesting location known as the Bennington Triangle. Nowhere too exotic. In fact, it's actually around Glastonbury Mountain in Vermont. And this area includes the towns of Bennington, Woodford, Shaftesbury, and the ghost towns of Somerset and Glastonbury. So
it's a lot of places.
Yeah, it's a lot in this little triangle, quote unquote little, I don't know. But it's mostly around, a lot of the mysteries mostly surrounding the mountain. It's a really huge, like, wooded area. So, with the inclusion of ghost towns in the equation, it's bound to have some type of, like, creepy things happening, right? Glastonbury was actually a small logging community for a while, but then when logging kind of died down, it was abandoned at the end of the 19th century. So it's fairly new at the time of all these disappearances to being a ghost town.
Gotcha.
I'd actually never heard of this location, but it kind of seems like it's right up my alley. So, you know, Mystery Triangle. I've covered the Bermuda Triangle in the past.
I covered the Bermuda Triangle, I'm pretty sure.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay, maybe it was you. I enjoy them, though. I enjoy, like...
What's mine is yours,
yeah.
And what's yours is yours.
So, lots of mystery. I'm down with that. So this location apparently has a long history of UFO and Bigfoot sightings. Things that I don't necessarily go together, but...
Has anyone ever considered maybe aliens look like Bigfoot?
Maybe Bigfoot is an alien.
Yeah, that would make a whole lot more sense about why we don't find him, because he doesn't live here. He just visits.
Maybe that's why Chewbacca looks the way he does. Okay. So this...
You know, there's a comic book where it's like some like non-canon comic book where the Millennium Falcon crashes into the Pacific Northwest, Han Solo dies.
What?
And Chewbacca wanders like sad and lonely forever, and he's actually Bigfoot.
Wow.
Not making it up. It's totally true.
Oh, I'd like to read that. That sounds interesting. Sad, but interesting. This area is also known for strange lights and sounds as well. It is also the location of multiple disappearances between 1940, like within the 1940s and 1950s. So this area is mostly known for the Battle of Bennington and other historical events that date back to the 1700s. But supposedly, according to Native American lore, the area is cursed. Because why not, right? Native Americans steer clear of the area, wary of its cursed nature, avoiding it as much as possible. There's a supposed Algonquin legend about a malevolent stone in the mountains that would open up and swallow anyone unlucky enough to step on it.
That's terrifying, because it's so well camouflaged.
There are also tales of wild men and other strange beasts in the woods. Some sources say that the Native Americans use the area strictly as a place to bury their dead. So...
You know, sometimes dead's better.
Yeah, Native American burial ground, already bad news, right? Don't build on it, that's all I know. It wasn't until 1992 when a New England author by the name of Joseph A. Kitcherow coined the phrase Bennington Triangle. And he used this phrase to kind of describe this whole mysterious area. He claimed it shared characteristics with that of the Bridgewater Triangle, which we've never covered yet, in the neighboring state of Massachusetts.
Why are they always triangles? Why can't they be like dodecahedrons?
I don't think it's as cool to say like Bermuda dodecahedron.
I think that sounds way more intimidating.
In the Glastonbury Mountain area, there have been sightings of a Bigfoot Bigfoot-like creature that dates back centuries, the first of which was reported in the early 1800s. The creature became known as the Bennington Monster. So what happened was that in the 1800s, a stagecoach was full of passengers. They were forced to stop when they came across a washed-out road. The driver noticed some really large footprints in the mud. These footprints were too large to be that of an average person. The coach was then attacked by a large creature that knocked it over onto its side, and the passengers within the coach saw the eyes of this mysterious monster before it roared and ran off into the forest.
What did those eyes look like?
It doesn't say. It never. They don't describe it. I'm sure they were beautiful though. Maybe they were beautiful blue eyes. Who knows? Wouldn't that be crazy though if Bigfoot was just this beautiful blue-eyed monster? Other reports describe it as a large, black-haired creature that stood over 6 foot tall. So it's just this giant, hairy entity.
And I'm fitting that description. You said black hair, over 6 feet tall. I think I just barely crossed that.
In 1943, a man named Carol Herrick went on a hunting trip 10 miles northeast of the ghost town of Glastonbury. So his body was discovered 3 days later.
I thought he was going to be someone who sighted Bigfoot. No, he winds up dead. Holy
so his
shit.
body was discovered 3 days later, surrounded by another set of huge, mysterious footprints. The cause of death was crushing. He was literally squeezed to death.
Wow.
The Bigfoot sightings aren't really what brought my attention to this area, this topic though, right? Because I started with true crime. So, it was the many stories of missing persons in the area that kind of got me interested. So whether these disappearances have to do with Bigfoots or not, that's another thing entirely.
Bigfoots?
But
big feet.
No, Bigfoot, I mean, I'm sure some people say it's big feet.
It's Bigfoot to pie, I'm pretty sure.
So over the years, there have been 30 to 40 unexplained disappearances on this mountain. On November 12th, 1945, a 74-year-old hunting guide named Matty Rivers was leading a party of 4 hunters into what was called the Hell Hollow area in the southwest woods of Glastonbury. Now, if you're going to some place named Hell Hollow, I'm sure it's not necessarily a good place to be. But sounds so far like people kind of need to stay out of this area. I don't know why people go there
I don't know why this had to happen just because we were spending our holiday in Hell's Anus.
Oh, because Hell Hollow.
Yeah.
I get it.
I'm just making a point that, like, it has a bad name. You should expect bad
They're
things.
hunters. They're there to go hunting. So Rivers was leading the group back to camp when he got ahead of them. So he went ahead of them to check if everything was all good to go. But when the party got to the camp, they found that Rivers never returned. He never made it back to the camp. At first, they weren't at all concerned because Rivers was skilled in survival and was an experienced woodsman. So they're like, oh, he's fine. And then more time went by. And then too much time went by. And following that span of time where it just didn't make sense that he wasn't there, an extensive search was performed. And that included 300 locals and U.S. Army soldiers that were dispatched from Massachusetts' Fort Devens. So the only thing the search group found was a rifle cartridge that matched the type that Rivers used.
That's frightening. Because he discharged 1 round, right?
Rifle cartridge. Yeah, that's just the remaining thing after you shoot it. Yeah.
Yep.
There was no evidence of an animal attack or any body. They didn't find anything. That was the only thing they found. Everyone hoped that with his skills, he would eventually show up back in town, but he never did. So it's thought that he disappeared along the Long Trail Road area and Vermont Route 9. So that's the area he kind of got disappeared in. He vanished. A year after his disappearance, an 18-year-old college student named Paula Weldon went hiking on the Long Trail. You can probably guess what's going to happen to this person. They don't get crushed by Bigfoot, but it's not good. So on Sunday, December 1st, in 1946, several people see her go on this hike, including an employee at Bennington Banner who had given her directions and an elderly couple who were about 100 yards behind her on her hike. So they followed her for a little bit. So she was easily recognizable because she wore a red coat on her hike. So I think she wore like this red coat, some jeans, and boots or something like that. No one knew anything about her whereabouts. No one was really concerned because they didn't check on her that night, I guess. But she didn't show up to her college classes the next morning. So she went to Bennington College, didn't make it to classes, and that made people wonder where she went. The ensuing search included 1,000 people. They had aircraft surveillance, and they even had help from the FBI. And there was a $5,000 reward incentive for any tips or anything that could help find her. Classes were even suspended so that the students could go help with the search.
That's really smart that they did that.
So, according to the elderly couple, she kind of disappeared as soon as she turned a corner on the trail. So she was going up the trail, they were following her, she turned a corner, and when they reached that corner, she was gone. They didn't see her anymore. That day, the day she disappeared, it was 50 degrees out. So she had a coat. But that night, it dropped down to 9 degrees. So she was not dressed like she was prepared to be out there for that. Despite the extensive search, there was no evidence found as to what could have possibly happened to her. Many blamed the authorities for their lack of sophistication in their investigation. So this investigation it kind of became the catalyst for the creation of the Vermont State Police 7 months later. So the Vermont State Police didn't even exist until after this. And they are responsible for wilderness search and rescue missions in the area. In the state, really, Vermont, right? Vermont State Police. So her disappearance inspired the 1951 novel Hangsaman by Shirley Jackson, who is the author of The Haunting at Hill House.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yep.
It's called Hangsman?
That's how Hangsaman.
Hangsaman.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought maybe I heard it wrong.
So, I was just mind blown by the fact that she wrote Haunting at Hill House.
That's an odd connection because we love that show so much.
I did not realize Shirley Jackson wrote that, but I don't know. Kudos.
Good work, Shirley.
Yeah, she's out there, in the ether, being like, hell yeah.
She's self-high-fiving herself right now. Good job, Shirley.
Maybe that's why she named one of the characters after herself.
It's odd that there's a self-insert, right? At least of the name for one of the kids in Hill House. I wonder if she's been through some shit.
Oh my god. She is the writer. She in the show, right?
She's a writer, yeah.
She is Steve.
Gonna have to have our people reach out to her people, see if we can get her on the show. We haven't done that in a long time.
I don't think you can reach out to the dead.
She's dead?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Really? When'd she die?
1965.
Okay, yeah. She's been gone for a minute.
I was like...
So that's why you said the ether. I thought you were being hyperbolic.
No, she dead. She gone when she ain't dead no more. Okay,
we're going to have our people get out a Ouija board and see if she wants to haunt the show with an EVP or something.
All right.
Please don't. That's not an invitation.
All right, so 3 years to the day after the disappearance of Paula Weldon, James Tedford went missing. So he was a veteran resident of the Bennington Soldiers' Home, and he had been in St. Albans visiting relatives and had returned home by bus, or was trying to return home by bus. So according to witnesses, he was indeed one of the 14 passengers on the bus at the last stop before Bennington. When the bus arrived in Bennington, though, he was nowhere to be seen. Like, he kind of just vanished.
While on the bus?
While on the bus.
Wow.
All of his belongings were still on the luggage rack. On his seat was an open bus timetable. No one saw him ever get off the bus in Bennington, and no one saw anything suspicious. It seemed like he disappeared
Up
somewhere.
until this one, it has felt to me like that meme that you see, where it's an overlay of, like, the missing people's cases in the United States of America and the cave system of the United States of America
Yeah.
and how creepy that overlaps.
Yeah.
This one feels different, though.
Yeah.
People vanishing into thin air is like, it's a different type of creepy.
The fact that on his empty seat was an open bus timetable. It's like, say he was sitting in that seat reading this timetable, and then he just disappears.
Yeah, that's nuts.
On October 12th, 1950, an 8-year-old boy named Paul Jepson went missing in Bennington while he was left in the cab of a pickup truck. His mom went to go check on their pigs and left him in the truck. When she got back to the truck, he was gone. He was wearing a bright red jacket, hard to miss. He had
another red jacket,
Yep.
huh? Oof.
He wasn't found in the surrounding area, so his mom obviously put in a report that he was missing. And a search party was put together that included bloodhounds to try and pick up his scent. These bloodhounds led them towards the Glastonbury Mountains, only for the scent to be lost at a nearby crossroads. According to his father, Paul had actually been talking about visiting the mountains for several days at this point. So I don't know if maybe he had plans to go to the mountain, to meet up with someone at some point,
And
or
he's
something
an
like
8-year-old.
that.
What kind of plans can
In
an 8-year-old have?
1950, there's no internet either.
Yeah.
So, but the abrupt drop in his scent leads to the belief that it may have been some type of abduction, whether that be in some motorcycle vehicle or something like that, you know. There were never any clues about what may have become of him. He just disappeared, vanished. 16 days after Paul's disappearance, 50-year-old Frida Langer went missing. So she was camping with some family in the woods near Glastonbury Mountain. She and her cousin Herbert Eisner went on a hike and got like a few hundred yards away from their campsite, which is not that far. A couple hundred yards, right? A few hundred yards. It really is not that far. She slipped and fell into a stream, soaking her clothes and shoes. So she told her cousin, stay here. She's going to go back to camp, change her clothes. She'll be back. So Herbert waits, but she never returns. So he went back to camp after waiting for a while to check if she was okay. Frida had never made it back to camp, and it seemed as if she kind of disappeared in broad daylight. So for weeks, people searched the area, including 400 police, firefighters, soldiers, volunteers, and they even had air support. So they had helicopters and stuff like that. No evidence of Frida was ever found until 7 months later, when on May 12th, 1951, her body was found near the Somerset Reservoir. It was near where they had set up their campsite. So this area had been searched previously. So her body turning up there doesn't make any sense because she was put in a grassy area that had been searched already. Their campsite was literally right there. And due to the state of decomposition, they couldn't figure out what the cause of death was.
Wow.
The case remains an unsolved mystery, like many of these missing persons cases. Langer was the last person to disappear and the only one whose body was found. There is no connection between the disappearances other than they all disappeared in the same general area and same general time period. Some say that it may have been the work of a serial killer.
I was about to say that.
Which kind of makes sense concerning like the missing boy and then the mystery deaths, you know? But not for all of them. It wouldn't make sense for every single one. But there are ones that you could pick out and be like, yeah, I could see that being a killer. In regards to the Native American curse, it's blamed on something more paranormal. It's said that this place is some sort of window to these otherworldly unexplained things, like the disappearance on the bus. Like, it just...
That one's
so
fucking creepy.
Some say it's something as simple as unstable weather, so that due to the wind patterns being unusually chaotic and confusing, people are just easily lost in the woods, in the forest area. So...
What's that My Favorite Murder saying? Stay out of the woods?
Stay out of the woods.
I think this is a pretty good example of that because, I mean, even just being on a bus going through this particular area and just vanishing without a trace is is just absolutely terrifying.
It's terrifying.
This last one, though, like the idea of having a giant search party looking through this area, and then once it's already been swept clean, having the body discovered there later.
Yeah.
That feels like some serial killer shit where like they waited to make sure, like it just rings to me like that person was part of the search party.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they knew that there was a place that they could put this body where someone look, because it's already been crossed off like a checklist.
Yeah.
It just seriously feels that way. And I wonder if it's a mixture of the two or if it's just legitimately one single serial killer who just struck over and over that was really prolific, and because people didn't really know. I don't know about the bus one though, is the one I keep going back to.
Yeah.
Like, how does someone vanish off a fucking bus and like just poof like they're gone?
It's weird. It doesn't make any sense. So this area is like a weird, beautifully creepy place. If you see pictures of it, it's just so green and it's just crazy wooded area. But it's terrifying. I would never want to walk in there. You know, it's just, I don't want to die.
I would have my cell phone taped to my chest like Spider-Man No Way Home, and I would be Facebook Live the entire time.
It's not understood why so many strange things happen there. It could be the history of the area or something with the land, or the Bigfoots, that too. It could be, you know, Bigfoots. Maybe that's what happened to her. Maybe she got abducted by a Bigfoot. It took her back to its cave and lived with them for a little bit, and she died somehow, and
maybe
she ended up
fucking
back there.
bird, and he just knew to stop going back to that cave, so he just dropped her off in that spot.
Creepier still about the mountain is that the trails stop part way up it. So because it stops like that, it's thought that no one ever goes past.
I was going to say, like, trails are naturally formed by things finding the path of least resistance through the woods. Not just human beings, but like animals too.
Yeah.
And if trails just stop, it's like there's a certain part things will just not go past.
Yep. Some say that when you walk in the woodlands of the Glastonbury Mountains, you don't hear anything living. You don't hear any sounds. It's as if the animals don't even want to go up there themselves.
That's terrifying.
Which is terrifying. Dude. I have chills. But yeah, so that's the story of the Bennington Triangle.
That's a good topic, Robin.
Thanks.
Good work. I think this was a really good episode.
I enjoyed it. I like weird, creepy things like that. So.
Yeah, I would go stay the night here if I had one of those.
Nope.
If I had one of those tents where it was like a two-way mirror where they couldn't see into your tent, but you could see out of the tent. Like I've seen those on Instagram and I think TikTok as well, where like, you can see the surroundings. Which I think is like stupid because I wouldn't be able to fall asleep if I could see things outside my tent. But in this particular case, I would be going there to stay awake all night, have like 16 cameras set up and a shotgun with me.
Wow.
So I could see anything that approaches that thinks that I'm just another stupid ass camper when really I'm watching them. Like, you think you're watching me? I'm watching you. That's the only scenario in which I would go.
What are you going to do?
So, and I'd take my shirt off as soon as they show up. I'm like, what do you want to do? But right on. Good stuff, Robin.
Thanks.
All right, so I think that's everything you have for this episode 223 of the Scaryish podcast. For folks who would like to send in their story, it doesn't have to be related to these mysterious disappearances or the Piasa. If you do have stories, Pious Saw, if you do have stories about those, we would love to hear it. But either way, feel free to reach out. Our email address is storytime@scaryish.com, or you can go to our website, scaryish.com, and click on Contact Us. You can also hit us up on our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scaryish podcast. Twitter is @scaryish_pod, and Instagram is @scaryish_podcast. We would love to hear from you. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scaryish_podcast. Those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1. At $1, you get ad free. If you're not into the monthly donation type thing, you can also go to ko-fi.com/scaryish podcast, and those are one-time donations.
Indeed. So thank you so much for everyone who listened to this episode. We sincerely appreciate you. That is everything we got. So Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.